I was recently interviewed by a YouTube channel in Istanbul where they asked me, are you rich?
Very wealthy. Yeah. It's true.
I earn about $40,000 a year and live in a beautiful, safe part of the world. I don't own a car, I don't eat at fancy restaurants, but I've been able to keep afloat for the most part. So there's a line in the finance industry that goes, everything you need to know about investing can fit on an index card. We're breaking down those things, and by the end of this video, you'll make $15 million. Warren Buffett says rule number 1 is never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. Now we're going to come back to this, but firstly I want to touch on how to avoid high interest debt. That's the first point. So my first video production company, The Rains Avenue Limited, was started by me and 2 friends, Zan and Adam. We had a few clients who made some decent videos, but we didn't know how to run the finances at all. So Zan proposed that we get a $10,000 loan from the bank in order to buy a bunch of film equipment so that we could charge more for videos and eventually pay off that loan. But what we didn't understand at the time is that we could have gotten equity on the business. By approaching investors and selling part of the company, we wouldn't have had the debt to the bank, which of course includes interest. We would have still had debt in a way, as the investors could ask for dividends or a payout. So which is better? Let's contextualize this. You and one other person start a company. You, I don't know, run an e-commerce store. You're 50% stakeholders each. You put your email in some government website, pay a $50 registration fee, boom, you got a company. Now you have 2 options. Bring someone in as an additional shareholder who, you sell them 25% of the company for $10,000. There's usually some legal fees when you sell part of the company, so let's say that's $2,000. Real quick though, there's a difference between a shareholder and a stakeholder. Shareholders are always stakeholders in a corporation, but stakeholders are not always shareholders. Shareholders own part of a public company through shares of a stock. Stakeholder wants to see the company prosper for reasons other than stock performance. Shareholders don't need to have long-term perspective on the company and can sell the stock whenever they need to. Stakeholders, on the other hand, are often in it for the long haul and have a greater need to see the company prosper. An example of a shareholder is anyone who owns shares in the company, whereas an example of stakeholders can be owners and shareholders, employees of the company, bondholders who own company-issued debt, and even customers who may rely on the company to provide a particular good or service. Okay, a little bit of a long-winded tangent, but back to the company. So if you make profit at the end of the year, let's say you make $5,000 minus those legal fees, you've now got $3,000 to throw around. So you can reinvest it in the company or take a little bit of profit. And the investor can also do the same because remember, they own part of the company, 25%. However, if you get a loan, you have to prove your cash flow. The creditor, in this example, the bank, will only give you the loan if you have securities against the loan. Securities include an amazing personality and a beautiful smile. Sorry, you need like real things. You can put up collateral, like a car that the bank can take away if the company isn't profitable. It's about presenting a case to the bank. You can make more money in the long term if they help you out now. That loan is going to get paid off eventually. However, if you go to an investor, they will always own a share in your company unless they sell. So the investor is willing to take on more risk than the banks because they will get far more gains in the long term. The investor is far more likely to give you money without understanding your cash flow. So at smaller scale, it's better to get a personal loan. When starting out a company, you need to look at your startup costs for the first year and understand what you need to pay for in terms of getting that cash flow going. So back to Buffett. When you're earning, it's really easy to adapt your spending to that earning. You can get nicer things to eat, nicer things to wear, go on more expensive evening or weekend trips, but you can't forget rule number 1. And I consider wasting money losing money. So take care to keep within your average means across time. If you can treat money just as precious as when you did when you started working, than when you do now or in the future, then you can save yourself a lot of hassle. What I'm saying here is just because you've got a pay rise and higher paying job now doesn't mean that you always will. Try to remember where you were 5 years ago, how you lived, what you spent your money on. If you can keep spending to an average throughout your life and find enjoyment in simple, humble things, then you won't get caught on that hedonistic treadmill of earning more and spending more. To be secure in the future and to guard against black swans like COVID-19, you've got to strive to save 10 to 20% of your income. A black swan is just an unprecedented event like a depression or even getting fired. Check out Black Swans by Nassim Taleb, by the way. Pretty good book. So some simple things that you can do to ensure you save 10 to 20% of your income right now. So pay your credit card in fully every month. It sounds really obvious, but it can be easy to just pay the minimum balance. So I went and had a look. My credit card has a purchase interest rate of 13.5% and a cash advance rate of 22%. So if you don't iron out those details, then there's some serious losses to be had. And be sure to budget how much you spend each month and set your credit card limit to around that. That way you don't have an extra balance that encourages you to, splash out on things that you probably don't need. Okay, and 3, try to save up money to have a 3 to 6 month buffer period of emergency funds. So this is going to give you a buffer against debt. If you have an accident or lose your job, then you can float on your savings and won't have to take out debt to support yourself. So when you're saving up to do this, be sure to focus on saving in the short term. It can be quite daunting running your personal finances and realizing that to save up for this 3 to 6 month buffer or a new car, you could be looking at like 2 years. So break down your savings goals into smaller chunks. That way you can stay motivated. So it's the same as any other habit really. You want to make it as easy as possible to begin so that you can reap the rewards of that habit over a long period of time. For example, guitar. If you started off and you didn't really know what you were doing and you played for 2 hours, the first time you played, first problem, you're gonna get sore fingers and you're not really gonna want to pick it up. And you're gonna burn out. You're gonna get tired of the same thing. You don't really know any chords yet, so you're just trying out these small things. However, if you played for, 20 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week, then you're gonna figure out how to actually play the guitar, and soon you'll be far better at it, which means that you're gonna come back to it over time. Savvy? Saving is kind of just like going to the gym. If you went to the gym for 5 minutes at the beginning, then you're going to set up that habit of coming back to the gym for 20, an hour, 2 hours. Soon you're Arnie. So build up that habit of saving. And number 4, avoid insurance for expenses that you can afford. My dad's always telling me to get home and contents insurance, travel insurance, car rental insurance. But since I moved out of home, I haven't spent a single cent on insurance. Not because I'm a financial genius, more because I didn't see the point in it. It's better to get insurance for the $50,000 problem than the $500 problem. Because given a set period of time, and not long at that, you'll end up spending more than $500 just in insuring the problem in the first place, even if it doesn't happen and you don't get to claim that back. Whereas you'll take far, far longer to save up for that $50,000 problem, and the insurance math is gonna work out to protect you against that problem if it ever happens. Kind of ties into liabilities and assets. You should try and cut down in your liabilities as much as possible. For example, sold my car 6 years ago because I understood it was a money pit and not essential for my life. I can ride my bike and catch the bus, so instead of spending money on my car for 6 years with insurance, fuel, repairs, road user charges, and parts, I've been able to buy up assets like the camera equipment, which is actually generating income, but giving me the ability to create videos like this. So try and find things in your life that you can cut down on liabilities and build up assets. And then 5, reduce your taxable income. The simplest way to reduce taxable income is to have cronies in government, put your money in an offshore account, and just be generally rich enough to stick it to the lawmakers. Well, that's not how it works over the whole world, but we're kind of US centric, so simplest way to do this is to set up a retirement plan where essentially you forego being paid now to be paid more in the future. So how does this work? You give that money that you would have earned now to a company or to the Reserve Bank, who then of course invest it wisely and earn more on it, and then pay it back to you at a little bit more than you would have originally paid it originally. 6, now let's talk about compound interest. So like I said, I earn about 40K a year. If I were to put away 4K a year in accounts that kept just up with inflation and I didn't lose any of that money, I'd have about $160,000 to retire on. But apparently, you have to have about $1 million to retire. That's a lot of money. So why is this so high? Basically because you have to retire for about 18 years or even longer, and you want to be able to retire on about 80% of your salary. Well, I did the math and I don't really have that much, going for me. This is all kind of freaky. So I went into a retirement calculator and I currently put away about $500 a week, which is 43% of my total income. So even though I don't earn six figures or anything crazy like that, I'm still on track to having 4.3 million by the time I'm 67. That's pretty crazy. That's with like no holidays and I don't lose any of the money. So it's far more likely that you'll probably be able to put away about 10%, which would leave me with 1.2 million of this money. And of this money, only 412K would be my own. The other 800 would be due to compound interest. Pretty cool. Now let's zoom in a bit. A $1,000 investment earning 6% compounded annually could become roughly $4,300 in 25 years. And that can be extremely high if that compounding was swapped out from 6 to 20%. It would be $95,000. And at 30%, it would be $705,000. And that's just $1,000. If you added to it every single week, you put 500 away for 25 years, you'd have 13.5 million. So the retirement thing isn't actually as daunting as you thought if you set it up early. And now number 7, let's look a little bit more at investing in general so you know how to save up that cash. They must know something I don't know. That's the most dangerous expression in investing. Just because people are buying it doesn't make it valuable. There are a few things that you can do to make investing less risky. Firstly, you can find a company that has very little debt. A company that has cash on hand is one that can weather the storms of the long-term debt cycle and all of the black swans headed our way. Then you can look for high barriers to entry for competition. So how do you actually pick a company that has high barrier to entries? Well, we should probably understand what high barriers to entries are. So a good defense at competition. Let's look at data centers for an example. The biggest data center in the world is KDDI America, $139 billion revenue, 41,000 employees, and 46 data centers. That's more than Amazon Web Services and Google. Now, there's no way a startup is going to be able to disrupt KDDI because they need an angel investor from hell in order to construct a data center to compete with KDDI.
So tell me, what did you design?
Unless, of course, they designed a new kind of data center that held twice as much storage on the same chip. But Moore's law has been proven to be correct so far, so the startup pipe dream will be just that. So this is barrier to entry. Not everybody can build an enormous structure that holds thousands of computers. Most people, on the other hand, can build a lemonade stand. Okay, so you found a company with a good moat. So that's the defense in terms of competition. But as you can see there, it can be complicated and it can become even more complicated pretty quickly. So always invest in businesses that you can understand. You need to know exactly how they make money. And I don't know anything about data centers. So remember to stick to what you know in investing. Peter Lynch says you always find accountants who own biotech companies, but don't actually have stock in the auditing companies that they probably know far more about. Then you're going to need to invest at a reasonable price, and you need to invest in a company immune to extrinsic factors. Of course, want to invest in a company that could last forever. Most importantly though, find a business that you can understand. So that is part 1 on personal finance and investing. Excuse the crazy title, I'm experimenting with clickbait. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to Debutify if you want to see part 2. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.